Girl describes life at sea, despite never leaving her landlocked village. Asterisk. When 7-year-old Sophia Reyes first described the taste of salt spray on her lips and the feeling of wooden planks swaying beneath her feet, her parents assumed she was simply playing pretend. But when their daughter began speaking with a thick Scottish accent she'd never heard before, detailing the daily routines of life aboard a 19th century merchant vessel with startling accuracy, Maria and Carlos Reyes realized they were witnessing something that defied explanation. Living in the remote mountain village of San Miguel, Guatemala, over 200 miles from the nearest ocean, Sophia had never seen anything larger than the small lake that supplied their community with water. Yet here she was, describing the anatomy of sailing ships, the hierarchy of crew members, and the brutal realities of maritime life with the intimate knowledge of someone who had lived it. When she began crying about the storm that took Captain MacLeod, speaking of drowning sailors and splintered masts, her parents knew they were confronting a mystery that would challenge everything they believed about memory, identity, and the impossible ways the past can resurface in the present. Asterisk. If stories that make you question the nature of memory and identity fascinate you, make sure to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. You're about to discover something that will change how you think about what children truly know. Part 1. The INCI D&T the morning of June 8, 2022, began with the familiar sounds of mountain village life in San Miguel, Guatemala. Roosters crowed. From adobe courtyards, the smell of wood smoke drifted from kitchen fires, and the distant bells of the village church marked the hour. 7-year-old Sophia Reyes sat at her family's warm wooden table, eating breakfast while her mother Maria prepared tortillas on the comal. The family had lived in San Miguel for generations, farming corn and beans on the terraced hillsides that surrounded their isolated community. The nearest city was a 4-hour journey on winding mountain roads, and the ocean was a distant concept that existed only in geography books and occasional television programs that reached their village through a temperamental satellite connection. The porridge is thin today, Sophia said suddenly, her voice carrying an accent that made Maria pause in her cooking. Cook said the oats were running low, and we'd have to make do until we reached port. Maria turned from the stove, confused. "¿Qué dijiste, Mia?" she asked, wondering what her daughter had said. But Sophia continued speaking, her usual Spanish replaced by English, delivered with a thick Scottish brogue that seemed impossible for a child who had never left their mountain village. The sea's been rough these past 3 days. Poor young Jamie's been sick over the rail since we left Aberdeen. Captain MacLeod says we'll make better time once we clear the straits. The transformation was startling. Sophia's posture had changed, her shoulders set with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority. Her dark eyes, usually bright with childish curiosity, now held a distant focus, as if she were seeing something beyond the adobe walls of their kitchen. "Sophia, mi amor, what are you talking about?" Maria asked, kneeling beside her daughter's chair. Sophia looked at her mother with momentary confusion, as if waking from a dream. "I was talking to the lads about the morning watch," she said, her voice returning to its normal childish cadence, but retaining traces of the Scottish accent. "We have to check the rigging before the wind picks up." Maria felt a chill run down her spine. "What lads? What rigging?" "The crew, of course," Sophia replied, her tone suggesting this should be obvious. "There's Tommy from Glasgow, and old Henderson, who's been sailing longer than anyone can remember. And there's the new boy, Peter, who's afraid of heights, but trying to learn the ropes." The level of detail was disturbing. Sophia spoke of these individuals with the casual familiarity of someone who worked alongside them daily. She described their personalities, their quirks, their fears with an intimacy that suggested deep personal knowledge. "We're carrying wool and whiskey to the Americas," Sophia continued, her voice taking on the matter-of-fact tone of someone discussing routine business. The cargo hold is full, and we're making good speed. But there's weather coming, I can feel it in my bones. Maria called for her husband Carlos, who was preparing for his work in the fields. When he entered the kitchen, Sophia looked up at him with an expression that seemed older than her years. "You look like Henderson when he's worried about the weather," she said, studying Carlos's face. "Same lines around the eyes, same way of holding your shoulders when you're thinking hard." Carlos had never heard his daughter speak English before, let alone with such fluency and such a distinctive accent. Their village school taught only Spanish, and while they occasionally received international television broadcasts, nothing in their environment could account for Sophia's sudden linguistic transformation. "Where did you learn to speak like that?" Carlos asked gently. Sophia looked puzzled by the question. "I've always spoken like this, when I'm with the crew, when I'm working the ship." She paused, touching her throat as if surprised by the sounds coming from it, but the words feel different in this place. Heavier. That evening, as the family sat around their small table for dinner, Sophia began to describe her day aboard the ship with the same casual detail she might use to discuss her school activities. She spoke of morning duties, afternoon repairs, and evening conversations with crew members who seemed as real to her as her own family. "The sunset was beautiful tonight," she said, her Scottish accent returning as she spoke. "Red as blood across the water, with the sails silhouetted against the sky. Tommy said it means fair weather tomorrow, but I'm not so sure. The wind's shifting, and the gulls are flying different." Maria and Carlos exchanged worried glances. Their daughter wasn't playing pretend. She was describing experiences with the vivid detail and emotional authenticity of someone recounting actual memories. The incident marked the beginning of a mystery that would consume the Reyes family and challenge their understanding of what their daughter truly knew about a world she had never seen. Part 2. Over the following weeks, Sophia's maritime experiences became a dominant presence in the Reyes household. What had initially seemed like an isolated incident evolved into daily episodes where their daughter would slip into the persona of someone living aboard a 19th century merchant vessel. The episodes followed a pattern that began to worry Maria and Carlos. Each morning, Sophia would wake up speaking in her Scottish accent, describing the weather conditions at sea and the duties that awaited her on deck. She would speak of checking the rigging, monitoring the cargo, and maintaining the ship's equipment, with the confidence of someone who had performed these tasks countless times. "The mainmast's been creaking something terrible," she would say over breakfast, her small hands moving as if adjusting invisible ropes. "We'll need to reinforce the stays before we hit rougher waters. Can't afford to lose the mast with this cargo aboard." The technical vocabulary Sophia used was remarkably sophisticated. She spoke of spankers and jibs, of port and starboard watches, and of dead reckoning with the casual fluency of an experienced sailor. When Carlos attempted to ask her about these terms, she would explain them with the patience of someone educating a landlubber. "The spanker's the sail at the back of the ship," she would explain, her accent thick with authority. "It helps with steering and balance. Without it, the ship would be like a wagon with a broken wheel." Most disturbing was how Sophia began to exhibit physical behaviors that aligned with her maritime descriptions. She would walk with a slight rolling gait, as if adjusting to the movement of a ship's deck. She would automatically reach for support when sitting down, as if compensating for motion that didn't exist in their stable mountain home. The family's meals became lessons in maritime history, as Sophia described the ship's provisions, the methods of food preservation, and the challenges of maintaining nutrition during long voyages. She spoke of hardtack and salt pork, of water that tasted of wood and metal, and of the constant battle against spoilage and scurvy. "We're running low on limes," she would say, her voice carrying genuine concern. "The lads are starting to show. Signs of the sickness. Their gums are bleeding, and their teeth are loose. We need to make port soon. The escalation reached a concerning level when Sophia began to exhibit emotional distress related to her maritime experiences. She would cry about storms that had damaged the ship, about crew members who had been injured in accidents, and about the constant danger of life at sea. "Poor Jamie fell from the rigging yesterday," she told her parents one evening, tears streaming down her face. "His leg's broken, and we're 3 days from port. There's nothing we can do but keep him comfortable and pray the bone sets right." These weren't the simple tears of a child playing pretend. Sophia's distress was genuine, her concern for invisible companions authentic and heartbreaking. She would speak of her shipmates with the loyalty and affection of someone who had shared real hardships and dangers. Carlos began documenting Sophia's episodes, writing down the technical terms she used and the historical details she provided. He was amazed by the consistency of her accounts. The same ship, the same crew, the same cargo, and the same destination appeared in her daily narratives. The family's routines began to accommodate Sophia's maritime schedule. She would insist on eating at times that corresponded to ship's watches, would refuse certain foods that she claimed weren't available at sea, and would spend hours staring at the mountains as if they were ocean horizons. Most remarkably, Sophia began to demonstrate knowledge of weather patterns and navigation that seemed impossible for a child who had never left their mountain village. She would predict changes in the local weather with startling accuracy, explaining that certain cloud formations and wind patterns indicated approaching storms. "The clouds are building from the west," she would say, her accent lending authority to her predictions. "We'll have rain by evening, and it'll be heavy. The barometer's been dropping all day." The family didn't own a barometer, and Sophia had never been taught about meteorology. Yet her weather predictions proved remarkably accurate. Her knowledge seemed to extend beyond simple observation to an intuitive understanding of atmospheric conditions that impressed even their neighbors. By July 2022, Sophia's maritime persona had become so dominant that she seemed to spend more time at sea than in her mountain village. The cheerful, playful child they had known was increasingly overshadowed by someone who carried the weight of adult responsibilities and the constant awareness of maritime dangers. The family realized they needed to understand what was happening to their daughter before her connection to an impossible world completely overwhelmed her present reality. Part 3. The Einvestigato desperate to understand the source of Sophia's detailed maritime knowledge. Maria and Carlos began researching everything their daughter had described about life aboard her mysterious ship. They started by documenting her technical vocabulary, her descriptions of daily routines, and the specific details about the vessel she claimed to serve aboard. Carlos, who had received a basic education before returning to village life, began researching maritime history at the small library in the nearest town. What he discovered troubled him deeply. The terms Sophia used, the procedures she described, and the ship's hierarchy she referenced were all historically accurate for 19th century merchant vessels. The ship she described, a 3-masted merchant vessel carrying wool and whiskey from Aberdeen to the Americas, matched the design and purpose of commercial ships that had operated during the 1800s. Her descriptions of crew responsibilities, cargo handling, and navigation techniques aligned perfectly with historical accounts of maritime commerce from that period. Maria approached the investigation differently, focusing on the personal details Sophia provided about her shipmates. She began keeping a journal of the names, personalities, and backgrounds her daughter described, looking for patterns that might explain the source of such specific information. The breakthrough in their research came when Carlos discovered a cache of historical documents in the archives of the Universidad de San Carlos in Guatemala City. Among the maritime records was a collection of ship manifests and crew lists from the 19th century. including vessels that had operated between Scotland and the Americas. On August 15, 2022, Carlos found the document that would change everything. In the crew manifest for the merchant vessel Highland Spirit, which had sailed from Aberdeen to New York in 1847, he found the names that had become familiar through Sophia's daily narratives. Thomas Mackenzie, listed as an able seaman from Glasgow; William Henderson, boatswain, age 52, and Peter Macpherson, apprentice seaman, age 16. The ship's captain was listed as Angus MacLeod, exactly as Sophia had described him. The cargo manifest showed wool and whiskey, the same goods Sophia had mentioned. In her daily reports, the vessel had been a 180-foot, three-masted merchant ship, precisely matching her technical descriptions. But the most shocking discovery came when Carlos found the ship's final entry in the maritime records. The Highland Spirit had been lost at sea during a severe storm off the coast of Newfoundland on November 14, 1847. All hands were reported lost, including the entire crew Sophia had been describing with such intimate detail. The newspaper account of the disaster, published in the Aberdeen Journal on December 3, 1847, ascribed the ship's final voyage, the Highland Spirit, under the command of Captain Angus MacLeod, was lost with all hands during a severe gale off the Grand Banks. The vessel was carrying a cargo of wool and whiskey, bound for New York, when she encountered the storm that claimed her and her crew of 18 souls. The article included brief biographies of some crew members, confirming details that Sophia had provided about their backgrounds and personalities. Thomas Mackenzie was described as a skilled sailor from Glasgow, known for his cheerful disposition and willingness to help younger crew members. William Henderson was noted as a veteran of 30 years at sea, respected for his knowledge of weather patterns and ship handling. Maria's investigation took a different direction when she began researching the geographic details Sophia had mentioned. Her daughter had described specific landmarks, weather patterns, and sea conditions that corresponded to the North Atlantic shipping routes of the 1840s Dr. Alaine Vasquez, a historian at the Universidad de San Carlos who specialized in maritime commerce, agreed to analyze the Reyes family's documentation. Her response was both fascinated and disturbed. "Your daughter is providing accurate information about maritime life that isn't available in popular sources," Dr. Vasquez explained during their consultation. "The technical details, the crew dynamics, the specific cargo, these match historical records that most people would never encounter." Dr. Vasquez arranged to meet with the family to conduct a more thorough investigation. On September 3, 2022, she visited San Miguel with a collection of historical documents, maps, and artifacts. From the period, Sophia's reaction to the historical materials was immediate and emotional. When shown a map of the North Atlantic shipping routes, she traced the path from Aberdeen to New York with her finger, pointing out specific hazards and landmarks along the way. "That's where the ice comes down in winter," she said, her Scottish accent strong as she indicated the Grand Banks area. "Ships have to be careful there, especially late in the season. The water's deep and the storms come fast." When Dr. Vasquez showed her a photograph of a 19th century merchant vessel similar to the Highland Spirit, Sophia began to cry. "That's her," she whispered. "That's my ship. But where are the lads? Where's the crew?" The investigation had revealed that Sophia possessed impossible knowledge about a specific ship and crew that had been lost at sea over 175 years ago. Her daily experiences seemed to be authentic memories of life aboard a vessel that had met a tragic end in the North Atlantic. Part 4. The BRE Conrogietche, the most stunning validation of Sophia's maritime memories, came when Dr. Vasquez made a discovery that would fundamentally challenge the family's understanding of their daughter's experiences. While researching the Highland Spirit disaster in the British Maritime Archives, she found a collection of personal letters written by crew members during the ship's final voyage. Among these letters was a dispatch sent from the ship's last port of call in Halifax, Nova Scotia, written by William Henderson to his sister in Aberdeen. The letter, dated October 30th, 1847, just 2 weeks before the ship's disappearance, contained details that matched Sophia's descriptions with chilling accuracy. Henderson wrote, "The weather has been rough these past days, and young Jamie McAllister has been terribly sick. The lad's not suited for sea life, but he's trying his best. Captain McLeod says we'll make better time once we clear the straits and catch the westerlies." The letter contained the exact phrasing Sophia had used in her first episode, down to the specific mention of young Jamie and his seasickness. But the breakthrough that would change everything came when Dr. Vasquez discovered another letter in the collection, written by Thomas Mackenzie to his mother in Glasgow. Mackenzie's letter described a crew member that hadn't appeared in any official records. "We have a new hand aboard, goes by Sandy, small in stature but keen to learn the ropes. The lad has sharp eyes for weather and a way with the rigging that surprises us all. Captain McLeod says he's never seen someone take to ship life so naturally." The description matched Sophia's maritime persona perfectly. She had always spoken of herself as Sandy during her episodes, had described her small stature as an advantage in the rigging, and had demonstrated the weather sensitivity that Mackenzie had noted in his letter. Dr. Vasquez contacted the British Maritime Museum, which held additional documents from the Highland Spirit's final voyage. Among these was a partial crew manifest that included an entry for I. McLeod, not the captain, but someone listed as a ship's boy with the notation, "Taken on at Aberdeen, skilled in rigging work." The museum's maritime specialist, Dr. Margaret Campbell, explained that it was common for ships to take on additional crew members, especially young sailors who weren't always formally recorded. Ship's boys were often listed only by initials or nicknames, she said. They were essential crew members, but weren't always documented in official records. The breakthrough reached its climax when Dr. Campbell discovered a journal entry from the Highland Spirit's voyage, written by Captain Angus MacLeod himself. The entry, dated November 10th, 1847, just 4 days before the ship's disappearance, contained a passage that made Dr. Vasquez's hands tremble as she read it. "Young Sandy has been invaluable during these rough seas. The boy has an instinct for the weather that surpasses even Henderson's experience. This morning, Sandy warned of the approaching storm before any of us could see the signs. The lad's connection to the sea runs deeper than most sailors achieve in a lifetime." The journal entry continued, "Sandy speaks little of life before the ship, but the boy's dedication to the crew and the vessel is absolute. In rough weather, Sandy's the first to volunteer for dangerous work and the last to seek shelter. If we weather this storm, it will be partly due to Sandy's warnings and quick thinking." The final entry that Dr. Campbell found was dated November 13th, 1847, the day before the ship's disappearance. Captain McLeod wrote, "The storm has been worse than any I've encountered in 20 years at sea. We've lost the mainmast, and the hull is taking on water. Sandy has been tireless in trying to save the ship, working alongside the crew with courage. That humbles us all. If we don't make it through this night, I want it recorded that no sailor could have served more faithfully or bravely." The historical documentation provided stunning validation of Sophia's maritime experiences. She wasn't just describing life aboard a 19th century ship. She was apparently accessing the memories of someone who had actually lived and died aboard the Highland Spirit. Dr. Campbell arranged for Sophia to be shown artifacts recovered from shipwrecks of the period, including items that might have been aboard vessels like the Highland Spirit. The child's reactions were immediate and emotional, recognizing tools, equipment, and personal items with the familiarity of someone who had used them daily. "That's Henderson's pipe," she said, pointing to a clay-smoking pipe in the collection. He carved those marks himself during the long watches. And that's the type of rope we used for the rigging, see how it's twisted? That's the mark of good hemp. The convergence of historical evidence, personal artifacts, and Sophia's detailed memories created a compelling case that the 7-year-old possessed authentic knowledge of life aboard a ship that had been lost at sea over 175 years ago. Part 5. The Siona Faron Ttion story of Sofia Reyes reached international attention when Dr. Vasquez presented the case at the International Maritime History Conference in September 2022. The presentation, titled Impossible Maritime Memory, a Case Study in Childhood Historical Consciousness, attracted significant skepticism from the academic community. Dr. Robert Sterling, a prominent maritime historian from the University of Edinburgh, traveled to Guatemala specifically to investigate what he called the Highland Spirit claims. He arrived with a team that included Dr. Catherine Nils, a child psychologist specializing in false memory formation, and Dr. James Patterson, an expert in maritime archaeology. The confrontation took place in the small library of San Miguel on October 12, 2022, with the entire village curious about the foreign visitors who had come to study their local mystery. Dr. Sterling approached the investigation with obvious skepticism, immediately questioning the methodology of the previous research. Children are remarkably skilled at absorbing historical information from various sources, Dr. Sterling explained to the assembled researchers. Television programs, internet content, overheard conversations all can contribute to elaborate fantasy narratives that appear to demonstrate impossible knowledge. The skeptical team began by examining the village for possible sources of maritime information. They searched the local school, the few homes with internet access, and the community center for any materials that might have exposed Sofia to specific details about 19th century shipping. Their investigation revealed minimal sources of maritime content. The village's internet connection was sporadic and primarily used for basic communication. The school's library contained no maritime history books, and the few television programs received were contemporary Spanish-language broadcasts. Dr. Mills then tested Sofia's responses using techniques designed to identify false memories. She presented the child with a mixture of accurate historical information and deliberate fabrications, monitoring her reactions for signs of suggestibility. Sofia's responses frustrated the skeptical team. She consistently rejected false information, often with the impatience of someone correcting obvious errors. When Dr. Mills claimed that 19th century ships commonly used electric lighting, Sofia looked puzzled and corrected her in her Scottish accent. "That's daft," she said. "We use oil lamps and candles. Electric's not been invented yet, and even if it had, where would we get the power at sea?" The confrontation reached its emotional peak when Dr. Sterling challenged Sofia directly about the reality of her maritime experiences. "Sofia, you need to understand that the Highland Spirit sank over 175 years ago. Everyone aboard that ship is dead. You cannot possibly remember being there." Sofia's reaction was immediate and profound. She began to cry, not with the simple upset of a corrected child, but with the deep, soul-crushing grief of someone confronting their own mortality. "I know they're dead," she said through her tears, her accent thick with emotion. "I know we all died in the storm, but I can still feel the water coming in, still hear the wind tearing at the sails. I can still feel the ship breaking apart under my feet." The intensity of Sofia's emotional response affected everyone in the room. Dr. Patterson, who had remained professionally detached throughout the investigation, found himself moved by the child's obvious trauma. "This isn't the reaction of a child whose fantasy has been challenged," he observed. "This is the response of someone reliving genuine traumatic memories. The most traumatic moment came when Dr. Sterling showed Sophia a detailed map of the North Atlantic, asking her to indicate where the Highland Spirit had been lost. Without hesitation, Sophia pointed to an area off the Grand Banks of Newfoundland, her finger landing precisely on the location where historical records indicated the ship had disappeared. "The storm came from the northeast," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The waves were mountains of water, and the wind was like the screaming of demons. We fought to save her, but the sea was stronger. Captain McLeod ordered us to the boats, but there wasn't time. The ship went down too fast." Dr. Sterling's skepticism began to waver as he observed Sophia's detailed knowledge of the disaster. Her description of the storm's direction, the wave conditions, and the ship's final moments matched meteorological records and survivor accounts from other vessels that had weathered similar storms in the area. The confrontation concluded without the definitive debunking that Dr. Sterling had expected to provide. Instead, his team found themselves confronting evidence that challenged their preconceptions about memory, consciousness, and the nature of historical experience. "We came here expecting to find conventional explanations for an extraordinary claim," Dr. Sterling admitted in his final report. "While we cannot accept supernatural interpretations, we must acknowledge that this child's knowledge and emotional responses present genuine anomalies that deserve continued investigation." The confrontation had validated the authenticity of Sophia's maritime memories while leaving the fundamental mystery unresolved. The Reyes family was left to continue navigating the complex reality of raising a child who seemed to carry the memories of a life lived and lost at sea over a century ago. Part 6. The After Made Today. Sophia Reyes is 11 years old, a thoughtful fifth grader who has learned to navigate between her mountain village life and the persistent memories of her existence aboard the Highland Spirit. The intense episodes of maritime experience have evolved into a more manageable relationship with her extraordinary memories. Though the emotional connection to her lost shipmates remains profound, Maria reports that Sophia's ship episodes have become less frequent, but more focused. She seems to access those memories when she has something important to remember, or when she feels the crew calling to her. Maria explains, "It's as if she's maintaining a connection to honor their memory." The family has worked with child psychologists to help Sophia develop healthy boundaries around her maritime experiences. She has learned to distinguish between her present life and her memories of the past, developing coping strategies for the grief and trauma that sometimes accompany her recollections of the shipwreck. Dr. Vasquez continues to document Sophia's experiences, comparing her ongoing memories with newly discovered historical documents. Additional research has revealed more details about the Highland Spirit's final voyage, many of which have been confirmed by Sophia's accounts. Sophia's case represents one of the most thoroughly documented instances of historical memory in children. Dr. Vasquez wrote in her 2024 follow-up study, "The level of detail, the emotional authenticity, and the historical accuracy continue to challenge our understanding of consciousness and memory." The British Maritime Museum has maintained interest in Sophia's case, with Dr. Campbell continuing to compare the child's descriptions with newly discovered artifacts and documents. The museum has acquired several of Sophia's drawings of shipboard life, displaying them alongside historical materials from the period. Sophia herself has developed a mature understanding of her unusual experiences. She speaks of her time aboard the Highland Spirit as if discussing a previous job or home, acknowledging the tragedy while finding meaning in preserving the memory of her shipmates. "They were good men," she told researchers during a recent interview, her Scottish accent returning as she spoke of the crew. "They died trying to save the ship and each other. Someone should remember them, should tell their story." The child has retained her connection to maritime culture and weather patterns, often surprising her teachers with her knowledge of nautical terms and her ability to predict local weather changes. Her understanding of the sea has brought unexpected benefits to her mountain community, as her weather predictions have helped local farmers time their planting and harvesting. Last year, the family traveled to the coast of Guatemala, giving Sophia her first opportunity to see the ocean. Her reaction was complex. She recognized the sea with the familiarity of someone coming home, but she also experienced intense emotional responses to the sight and sound of the waves. "It's beautiful," she said, standing on the beach with tears streaming down her face. "But it's also dangerous. The sea gives life, but it also takes it away." The lads knew that, and they respected it. The scientific community continues to study Sophia's case, with researchers from multiple disciplines attempting to understand the nature of her maritime memories. The Institute for Consciousness Studies has documented her case, alongside similar instances of children displaying impossible historical knowledge. Other families have reached out to share their own experiences with children who remember lives from the past. The Reyes family has become part of a support network for parents navigating similar mysteries, offering guidance and understanding to those whose children carry memories that shouldn't exist. Carlos and Maria have learned to embrace the profound questions raised by their daughter's experiences. They've created a space in their home where Sophia can honor her maritime memories while remaining grounded in her present life. "We stopped trying to explain why this happened," Carlos reflects. "Instead, we focus on helping Sophia use her experiences to understand the value of courage, loyalty, and sacrifice. Whether these are memories from a past life or something else entirely, they've taught her important lessons about how to live." Sophia continues to grow and develop as both a normal child and a keeper of maritime history. Her story has become a bridge between past and present, carrying forward the courage and dedication of sailors who died at sea over a century ago. She remains connected to her shipmates through dreams and memories, serving as a living testament to lives that might otherwise be forgotten. Her experiences have brought historical figures to life, giving voice to those who were lost to the sea, but whose stories continue through her memories. The mystery of Sophia's maritime memories remains unsolved, but her journey has provided comfort to families dealing with similar phenomena and has contributed to a growing understanding of the complex relationship between consciousness, memory, and historical experience. Perhaps the most profound aspect of Sophia's story isn't the mystery of how she remembers a life lived at sea, but the possibility that some experiences are so fundamental to the human spirit, the courage to face danger, the loyalty to protect others, the dedication to duty, that they transcend the boundaries of individual lives, waiting in the depths of consciousness like messages in bottles, ready to wash ashore in the hearts of those who are meant to carry them forward.